postage, no sender, and only her name handwritten in perfect calligraphy, Ivy Laurent. Inside, a single card, thick as velvet, its cream paper scented with lavender and cedar. Embossed in silver at the center was a monogrammed crest, an ornate O entwined with rose thorns. You are summoned to Maison Orage, spring session, Paris. No RSVP, no instructions, no explanation. Ivy reread it a dozen times, her breath catching in her throat each time. Maison Orage wasn't a fashion house, it was a myth, a legend spoken of in whisper threads among design students and industry elite. No one applied to Maison Orage, no one visited, no shows, no social media, no interviews, only rumors. It was said the house had been founded in the late 1800s, passed down through enigmatic successors. The current head, Lucien Deveau, hadn't been photographed in over 10 years. Some called him reclusive, others called him immortal. But one thing was certain: those who entered Maison Orage rarely returned the same. And now, Ivy was being summoned. She packed without thinking: sketchbooks, shears, hand-measured muslin rolls, her grandmother's antique pincushion. She left her tiny flat in Lyon before dawn. Her fingers trembled the entire train ride to Paris, adrenaline biting behind her ribs like cold wine. At Gare de Lyon, she expected a crowd, a sign, some indication of arrival. Instead, a black town car sat waiting at the edge of the platform. The driver, immaculately dressed in charcoal gray, sunglasses despite the overcast sky, opened the door without a word. "Miss Laurent," he said, "welcome." The car rolled through the Parisian streets like a ghost, avoiding main roads, slipping into alleyways that narrowed into silence. Ivy pressed her forehead to the window, heart pacing. And then they stopped. An iron gate loomed before her, half concealed by overgrown vines, carved with swirling patterns and wrought iron roses. Beyond it stood a building that looked more like a chapel than an atelier. Tall arched windows, stone towers dusted with ivy, a single chandelier glittering behind glass. Maison Orage. She stepped out, her boots crunching on old gravel, the air perfumed with bergamot and something smoky. The driver didn't follow. The gate clicked open without a sound. No welcome sign, no reception desk, just an open door and the scent of silk. Inside, light filtered through stained glass skylights, casting soft reds and violets across stone floors. Mannequins lined the halls, some dressed, some draped in unfinished works, others bare, as if frozen mid-transformation. Every step Ivy took echoed like it didn't belong to her. A woman appeared at the far end of the corridor, tall, bone-thin, in a black silk suit with a silver brooch at her throat. "Follow me," she said. She never gave her name. They passed 3 halls, a winding staircase, and a sunken salon filled with bolts of rare fabric, peacock velvet, obsidian organza, featherlight cashmere. Finally, the woman led Ivy to a wide atelier with floor-to-ceiling mirrors and wide cutting tables. "Sketch," the woman said. "Here." A chair, a stack of blank paper, charcoal pencils. No theme, no prompt, no direction, just sketch. Ivy hesitated for a heartbeat, then drew. Lines flowed like breath. She didn't think, didn't analyze. A silhouette formed, then another. Sleeves of illusion netting, bodices shaped like poetry, skirts like midnight. Her hand flew, faster and faster, until the pages stacked into a mountain beside her. And still, silence. Until a voice behind her made her freeze. "Show me the one you fear." She turned. He was standing in the doorway. Lucien Deveau. He looked exactly like the photographs she'd memorized, and nothing like them at all. Tall, dressed in an all-black suit with no tie, his features sharp and cold. His hair was dark, slicked back but slightly tousled, like he just left something unfinished. And his eyes, steel gray, so light they almost shimmered. He didn't move, didn't blink. Ivy's heart skidded. He stepped forward. You drew with hunger, but only one of them scared you. Show it to me. She flipped through the pages, hands shaking, found it. A gown with a slit too high, shoulders too bare, curves too sharp. It revealed nothing and everything. Lucien took it in one glance, then looked directly into her. That's the one we make. Her room was at the top of the West Tower. A 4-poster bed draped in gauze. A wardrobe already stocked in her size. The windows opened onto a balcony that overlooked the Seine, and the air that drifted in smelled of citrus and rain. On the bed, a folded black silk robe and a single white card. Wear this. Come to the atelier at midnight. Bring no questions. LD. She did. The atelier had changed. Candlelight now replaced the overheads. The mirrors reflected only pieces of her. Shoulders, collarbone, the hollow of her throat. Lucien was waiting, sleeves rolled up, a measuring tape in one hand. He said nothing as she stepped forward. When he reached for her waist, she didn't flinch. His hands didn't linger, but they didn't rush either. As he measured, neck, shoulders, wrists, he recited fabric names like prayers. Moire taffeta, silk georgette, bone mesh, smoke thread. She whispered, I've never heard of some of those. You will, he said. They worked until dawn, not a word about fashion. No talk of trends, brands, or celebrity clients. Only cuts, lines, mood. I don't design for bodies, he said once. I design for the parts of people they try to hide. She didn't know what that meant, yet. But when he brushed a piece of fabric across her collarbone and whispered, Now you feel it, she understood. In the days that followed, she saw no other students, no other staff, aside from the silent woman in silver heels who brought her meals and linens. Lucien appeared and disappeared unpredictably. Sometimes he watched her work from the upper balcony. Other times he stood behind her, correcting her grip on the shears, murmuring critiques just inches from her ear. He never touched her beyond necessity, but every second near him felt like fire waiting for permission. One night, she returned to her room to find a dress laid out, charcoal gray, sheer at the sides, embroidered with threads that shimmered blue in moonlight. No note this time, just an understanding. She wore it, went to the dining hall for the first time. He was already seated, the table set for two, wine the color of garnets, plates of figs, dark bread, soft cheese. No one else in sight. Lucien looked at her and said, You wear tension like lace. She sat. He poured, and they dined, wordlessly, intimately, as if this were the 20th time they'd done it. When she rose to leave, he stood behind her, close, but still not touching. His voice was low. You're beginning to fit your shape. She lay awake until morning, and when she finally fell asleep, she dreamed of silk unraveling, of fingers ghosting over her spine, of being stitched into something she had never dared to wear. The next morning, Ivy found the dress from the night before was gone. In its place was a folded note, placed on the seat where she'd sat at the dinner table, as if it had been waiting there the whole time. You wear power like silk, but you haven't earned it yet. Come to the Red Room at dusk, LD. There were no maps in Maison Orage, no labels, no digital signs. You learned the layout the way you learned a lover's body, through proximity, repetition, and blind trust. She searched the halls, whispering under her breath, touching doors until one opened on its own. The red room wasn't red. It was black. Everything. The walls, the carpet, the ceiling, even the chandeliers. The only red came from the rose that lay on a single chair in the center. Lucien stood in the far corner, silhouetted by the low, warm light that spilled from a glassless window. He said nothing, only nodded at the rose. She stepped inside. The door closed behind her. He walked to her without a sound. "Sit," he said. She did. He circled her, slow, like a tailor examining a gown he hadn't decided whether to keep or cut. "You dress like someone waiting to be discovered." "I wasn't aware I needed rescuing." Lucien leaned down, his mouth near her ear. "Not rescue, excavation." He moved to stand in front of her. "The piece you designed last week. Why did you hide it?" "I didn't hide it. You buried it. Sketchbook, 3rd page from the back." She blinked. He'd gone through her drawings. He watched her reaction without apology. "I don't steal," he said softly. "I reveal, and you drew that for yourself, not me." "It wasn't ready." "You weren't ready," he corrected. He handed her a small box, black velvet, no latch. Inside, a pair of shears, but not ordinary ones, gold-handled, old, engraved. She looked up at him. "These were hers," he said. "Whose?" "My mother's." Her breath caught. "She founded Maison Orage before me," he said. "Not as a brand, as a sanctuary, for the ones too dangerous to dress themselves." He held her gaze. "Use them." Ivy began to dream differently after that. Not of dresses, but of threads snaking around her wrists, silk turning to steel, and Lucien's hands always just out of reach. Each day brought something new, a new assignment. Drape a bodice using nothing but blindfold and memory. A new rule, no sketching after sunset. A new test, design a gown for the version of herself she feared most. Lucien never offered praise, but sometimes, when she least expected it, he left fragments of her work, reimagined, hanging on forms around the atelier. It was as if he was reconstructing her from the inside out. One night, she found a letter slid under her door. No wax seal this time, only ink. "I want to see what you're hiding behind your silence. Wear the dress you designed in secret. No underlayers, no hesitation. Balcony, midnight. Come only if you're ready to be unstitched." LD, her fingers trembled as she held the paper. She knew exactly which dress he meant. She hadn't even shown it to herself fully. The lines were too raw, too vulnerable. But when midnight came, she wore it. Fine straps, open back, tension sewn into every seam. The balcony overlooked the private gardens, a space she had never been allowed into. Lucien stood near the balustrade, his back to her. He didn't turn. "Most people cover what they love most," he said quietly, "or what they hate." Ivy stepped closer. "I'm not sure which mine is yet," she admitted. He looked over his shoulder, eyes dark now, not gray, not shimmering, heavy, hungry. His gaze dropped over her, from collarbone to wrist to the pulse at her throat. "You shouldn't have worn that," he said. "Why?" "Because I don't know if I can leave it on you." Her pulse spiked. She stepped toward him again, close now. His hand hovered at her waist, not touching, but so near she could feel the warmth. "Then take it off," she whispered. He smiled, but didn't move. "I said I don't know if I can, Ivy." She swallowed. "What happens if you do?" Lucien exhaled. "I stop seeing you as a canvas, and start seeing you as mine." She stepped back, but not out of fear, because she wasn't ready, and that terrified her more than anything. For the next few days, she didn't see him. He left no notes. The atelier remained open, but she was alone in it. She worked longer, slept less. Something in her had been unstitched, and she didn't know how to hem it back. Finally, a new message came, this time delivered by the woman in silver heels. It wasn't written. It was a single scrap of fabric, torn silk in 2 colors, her signature charcoal and Lucian's black. It was a challenge, a choice. He wanted her to create something they both had to wear. She sketched for hours, then burned the first draft, sketched again, and when she brought it to the atelier, she found Lucien already waiting. No candles, no mirrors, just the cutting table. She laid the design before him. He studied it, didn't speak. Then he reached for a blade and made the first cut. They worked in silence, side by side. His hand brushed hers once when reaching for the same pin. She didn't move away. Later, as she folded the final seam, he reached for her wrist, held it, not firmly, not possessively, just held. "You're no longer afraid of the fabric," he said. "No." He turned her palm upward. "But are you afraid of me?" She didn't answer. Not because she was afraid, but because she wasn't anymore, and that scared her most of all. That night, she dreamed of being fitted, not with measuring tape or pins, but with intention, of standing before a mirror and watching her reflection reach out first. Maison Orage no longer felt like a place. It felt like a rhythm. Every creak of the floorboards, every shift of candlelight against the silk-paneled walls carried the pulse of something living. Ivy moved through the house like breath, inhaling the tension and exhaling restraint. The days blurred into drapes, fittings, sketches. The nights were slower, more dangerous. Lucien was always present now, not always speaking, but always there, watching, waiting, sometimes touching. The garment they made together, charcoal and black, wasn't a dress. It was a statement, a hybrid, part armor, part seduction, layers that revealed more the longer one looked. Sharp angles softened by deliberate curves. It didn't follow her shape, it redefined it. And when she first wore it in the West Hall, where the staff occasionally passed through, the reactions were quiet, too quiet, until Lucien stepped out of the shadows and simply said, "No one will see you the same again." He didn't smile, but his voice had softened. She felt it in her stomach, in her wrists, in the aching between her ribs. He began to teach her through silence. They no longer needed instructions. He would lay out fabric, and she would know what to do. She would draw a sleeve, and he'd add an invisible seam at the hem that made it collapse more beautifully when worn. Their bodies moved in sync across the atelier like dancers choreographed by instinct alone. One night, she looked up from the hem she was pinning, and he was watching her again. But different this time, not the way a mentor watches a student, but the way a man watches the storm he's tried too long to control. "I've designed with dozens," he said quietly, "but only one has shaped me back." Ivy blinked. "Is that what this is?" He stepped closer. "It's not love," he said. "It's authorship." Her breath caught, not at the word, at the truth. Because she wasn't falling in love with him. She was being written by him and rewriting herself in return. The house changed too. Rooms opened that hadn't before. The mirror hallway on the east wing. The library filled with design journals no one had touched in decades. A staircase that led nowhere until she stepped on it at dusk and found herself in the hidden fitting gallery with mannequins dressed in gowns she hadn't seen since her sketches. He was building something around her and inside her. The next test came not in the atelier, but in the ballroom, a room she hadn't even known existed. She was summoned there by a note wrapped around a black feather. Tonight, you wear the design, but you must not speak. They will judge. You will not defend. Only endure. Only own. LD. The dress was already waiting, floor length, skin hugging, off shoulder with a collar that curved around the base of her throat like a promise and a threat. She wore it, hair up, eyes lined in kohl. When she stepped into the ballroom, the gasps came instantly. Designers, models, staff, and Lucian at the far end, seated, hands clasped beneath his chin. He didn't move, didn't acknowledge her, but the weight of his gaze never left her. A man whispered, "Too much skin." A woman hissed, "It's desperate. Obvious." Another murmured, "It's him. You can see him in every line." But Ivy didn't flinch, didn't speak. She walked the room like a runway, owned the silence like a crown. And when she reached the center, she turned to face him and bowed just slightly, not in submission, but in recognition. His jaw clenched, his hands flexed once, then relaxed. Later that night, he came to her room, unannounced, uninvited. She opened the door before he knocked. His voice was low, ragged. "I shouldn't want to touch what I've designed." She met his eyes. "Then stop designing me." A beat of silence, and then he stepped in. Not with urgency, but with intent. His fingers brushed her jaw, her throat, then paused at the silk seam at her shoulder. "May I undo what I've made?" Her breath trembled. Yes. He didn't kiss her. He removed her, not quickly, but reverently, like undoing stitches one by one, testing each thread for resistance. His mouth hovered at her collarbone. His palms cupped her ribs like they were learning their weight. And his voice, when it came, was nearly a confession. "I can't be gentle." She tilted her head. "Then be honest." What happened after was not rushed, not fevered. It was precise. Like tailoring, every touch exact, every breath measured. He didn't dominate. He directed, guided, and let her respond with equal fire. There were no words, only gasps between pulls, only sighs between seams. When it ended, they lay in silence, the kind that meant everything had changed, and nothing could be undone. The next morning, she returned to the atelier alone. On her work table, a new note. "You are no longer an apprentice. You are the muse." LD beneath it, a swatch of fabric, gold, soft as breath, and something else. Her name, stitched in black thread at the corner. Not Ivy Laurent, just Ivy. She pressed it to her chest and wept. The air in Maison Orage had changed. It no longer whispered. It waited, as if the walls themselves were holding breath, sensing that something, someone, was about to break. Ivy walked the corridors with bare feet now. Her heels made too much noise, too much demand. The silence was more seductive. Lucian had stopped leaving notes, not because he had withdrawn, but because he no longer needed to speak to direct her. Their connection had evolved into something wordless. Movements communicated more than phrases ever could. When he wanted her in the atelier, a single pin would appear on her table, head turned toward the west window. When she wanted him, she would leave a piece of muslin torn into a ribbon and hang it from her balcony. That was enough, and every night he came, sometimes only to speak, sometimes only to touch her wrist and remind Not like a lover, but like a designer dismantling a form he could not bear to destroy. The dress they'd begun working on weeks ago now consumed her waking hours. It was nothing like her other work. It wasn't made to flatter. It was made to reveal. The design had no symmetry. The lines made no sense to the eye. But when worn, it moved like something alive, shifting with her breath, clinging to curves she'd hidden her entire life. Lucian refused to show anyone else. "This one is for the archive," he said. "But I thought the archive was for the forgotten," she replied. His eyes had darkened then. "No, Ivy. The archive is for the sacred." She began to notice other things changing. The staff stopped speaking when she entered a room. Designers, those few she'd glimpsed in the West Wing, lowered their eyes. One even whispered to another as she passed, "She's his now." She should have felt proud. She felt caged because she hadn't said yes. Not to Lucian, not to the dress, not to the house. But she hadn't said no either, and that silence was its own kind of binding. On the 7th night after the ballroom, she found him in the mirror hallway. He stood before the full-length pane that didn't reflect, a trick of lighting, or magic, or both. His expression unreadable. He didn't turn when she entered. "I used to think clothing could protect me," he said. She stepped beside him, and now he looked at her. "Now I know it only delays the inevitable." She touched the fabric at her hip. The inevitable. Exposure. He turned to face her. "I've made you into something no one can ignore, but I didn't ask what that would do to you." She swallowed. "I wanted it." He shook his head. "Number you wanted freedom. What I gave you is a pedestal. They're not the same." That night, he didn't come to her room. She didn't summon him, but neither of them slept. She could feel it, like a cord stretched between their doors, trembling, fraying. The next day, a woman came, someone new, an older designer, perhaps 50, with a smile too sharp. She wore crimson, unlike anyone else in Maison Orage. "I remember when he shaped me," the woman said. "I remember thinking I was the last." She reached out, touched Ivy's arm. "He always leaves a seam unfinished. Don't let it be yours." Then she walked away. No name, no reason, no goodbye. Ivy confronted Lucien that night, not with anger, with presence. She entered the atelier. He was drafting at the long table, candlelight casting shadows across his forearms. She didn't speak. She climbed onto the table, sat in front of him, pulled the pins from her hair and let it fall, then removed her dress, slowly, deliberately, and waited. His pencil stilled. He met her eyes. "You're asking me to finish the pattern?" She nodded. "I'm not sure what I become if I do," he said. "Then don't finish it for you," she whispered. "Finish it for me." That night, he didn't undress her. He didn't press her into a wall or a bed or a silk-draped chair. He lay her across the cutting table and traced her spine with a chalk line, as if her skin were muslin, and her soul, the fabric being tailored. Every touch was a stitch, every kiss a knot. He worshipped her, not in reverence, in realization. She was the design he could never replicate. She woke alone, but not cold. The note on her chest read, "You are no longer my muse. You are my pattern, and I fear I may not survive what I've made." Maison Orage began preparing for the equinox showing, a once-per-decade event where only one design was presented. Lucien had not done one since before Ivy was born. Now, he said, it would be hers, not his, not theirs. "Aaron, but I didn't apply," she protested. "You were chosen." I didn't ask for this. He stepped close. I didn't ask for you either. She worked in silence. 3 days. No food, only water and thread and her own breath, held and released as she stitched each piece into place. The final gown, black and gold, veined with thread so fine it looked like blood in moonlight. No seams visible, no fastenings. It would only fit her, and only once. The night of the showing, the entire house stilled. Guests arrived in masks. The elite of fashion whispered legends, forgotten icons. No cameras, no interviews, just a single room, one light, and Ivy. She stepped onto the platform, not walking, gliding, not smiling, burning. And when the lights flared, they saw not a woman in a dress, but a truth no one could unsee. A design not of fabric, but of fear, power, and surrender. Lucian did not watch from the balcony. He stood beside her, and when she turned to him, lips trembling, he knelt, not in romance, but in respect. The day after the equinox showing, Ivy woke to silence. Not the ordinary hush of Maison Arage's candlelit corridors, but something deeper. Still, like the moment before thunder. The halls were empty, no staff, no murmured footsteps. Even the chandeliers seemed dimmer, as if the house itself were in mourning or anticipation. The gown she had worn now lay folded in a glass case beside her bed. No longer hers, only the memory of it. She ran her fingers along the glass and saw something written beneath it in thread-thin calligraphy. There is no seam between you and the work anymore. Lucian hadn't returned to her. She hadn't seen him since the showing, but his presence still lingered, woven into the air, into the warp and weft of her very breath. She wandered the atelier, the ballroom, the balcony, the rose garden. Nothing, no trace. But that night, as the sky darkened to violet, a familiar piece of fabric appeared on her work table. The original charcoal and black dress they had created together. Except now, it had been unstitched, meticulously taken apart, each seam undone, each layer peeled away. It was no longer a garment. It was a question. And beside it, a note. You were never mine, but I made you as if you were. If you can restitch this without me, you'll never need anyone again. LD. She stared at the pieces for a long time. It wasn't grief she felt. It was fear, because some part of her wanted to not complete it. Some part of her wanted him to finish it for her, to return, to guide, to correct. But that wasn't the woman who'd walked the platform in front of the world. That wasn't who she'd become. She inhaled, took up the shears, and began. Each stitch was a memory. The first time she entered the atelier. The way he said her name the first time, like it was already written in silk. The first cut she made under his eyes. The silence between them when she first let him undress her, not with hands, but with presence. Every piece of thread she wove back into the fabric was not just a repair. It was a rewriting, a reclaiming. On the third night, it was finished. The same dress, but not the same. Sharper now, more dangerous, not made to be worn by someone wanting to be seen, but by someone unafraid to be watched. At dawn, she carried it to the hidden room beneath the main gallery, the archive, a place she had never been allowed into. The door opened at her touch. Inside, dresses suspended in glass cases, gowns with names she recognized, legends, myths, forgotten muses and creators. And at the far wall, a single open pedestal. She placed the dress inside, turned, and found Lucian waiting. He looked different, not in body, in gaze. There was no ownership in his eyes now. No hunger, only awe. "You completed it," he said. She nodded. "I almost didn't." "But you did." A beat of silence. Then she asked the question that had haunted her for weeks. "Did you bring me here to be yours?" Lucian stepped closer. "No. I brought you here to make you you. I just didn't know I'd lose myself in the process." Her throat tightened. "Is that why you left?" He nodded, slowly. "If I stayed, I'd never let you go, and you wouldn't have finished it." Another beat. Her voice broke. "Then why are you here now?" His answer came soft. "To ask if I can stay without shaping you." She didn't speak. She stepped forward, took his hand, placed it over her heart, and said the one thing he'd never said to her. "I choose you." They didn't return to the atelier that night. They walked the garden paths, hand in hand. No masks, no roles, no designs. When he kissed her, it wasn't with hunger or control. It was with worship. Because she was no longer his creation. She was his equal. Weeks passed. The world knocked at Maison Orage's door. Magazine editors, runway scouts, house buyers. Lucian said nothing, but Ivy answered. She held a showing in the old ballroom. 10 dresses, all hers, each inspired by a different silence she had worn, each one flawless, and none of them bore Lucian's name, only hers. On the final night of the season, she stood once more at the top of the staircase. Below, a room full of guests whispered her name, Ivy Laurent, the girl who vanished into a fashion house and returned as something unnameable. Lucian stood beside her. He did not touch her. He did not lead her. He simply opened the door and let her walk through. The dress from the archive, the one they built together, was never shown publicly. It became legend. Designers claimed they saw it once through a locked glass pane at a private estate in Corsica. Others say Ivy burned it the day she opened her own atelier. But some know the truth, that it was never meant for a runway. It was meant to be worn by only one person. Once, in front of the one man